Graphic Policy Radio, and this is the Comics Podcast. This is your host, Ilana Levin, aka Ilana Brooklyn. And this is the Comics Podcast for people who know that Black Mask is definitely Yang Gang in the primary, but is probably going to go Trump in the general, even if he doesn't want to admit it in public. That's right, we're talking about the Birds of Prey, aka Birds of Prey and the Fantabulous Emancipation of one Harley Quinn, which has since been renamed to just be Harley Quinn: Birds of Prey. I mean, I loved that original name title, but you're right. It was kind of hard for search engine optimization and keeping on the tip of people's tongues. But I'm really excited to be talking about this movie. I'm being joined by three fantabulous guests. First-time guest is Nadia Shemes. Nadia is an Arab-American comic writer and native Brooklynite. She's best known for being the creator of Corpus, a comics anthology of bodily ailments, and the co-creator of Squire, a YA Middle Eastern fantasy set from the HarperCollins Next Year. You can find her and her movie takes on Twitter at Nadia_SHAMMAS_. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be on.
Yay. And joining me are two classic guests. Veronique Emma Houbois is a fiercely queer critic, cartoonist, and consultant, most recently spotted in the Pacific Northwest, writing her Transmascara column for Comicosity and hosting Read from the Rafters on YouTube as her drag persona, Judith Slays. Named one of sci-fi's most influential women in genre 2017, her credits include Love is Love for IDW/DC, Critical Chips Volume 2 for Shortbox, and Called Into Being 200 Years of Frankenstein. Welcome back, Emma.
Hi, great to be here. And actually, that award was given to me by our next guest.
Yeah,
what?
I wasn't sure if it was fair to say, but yeah.
Our next guest is Sarah Century. Sarah is a writer of short stories, articles, and of comics and film, and many, many zines. She is an artist, comic creator, and filmmaker, as well as co-host of the weekly podcast Bitches on Comics, which I really enjoy. Welcome back, Sarah.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be here.
So before we get into the spoilers section, I do want to give people a sense of what I think about the movie overall, since I know not everybody is committed to seeing it. And I will tell you, I enjoyed this movie tremendously. My capsule review, spoiler-free, would be that it is a gleefully violent and funny action movie with John Wick-level fight choreography, all about women waging cathartic violence against abusive men. With a great soundtrack and costumes, the whole theater was laughing and cheering for a diverse cast, including queer women playing characters, not subtextually queer, but like textually queer women who are all there kicking ass, being hot, and supporting each other. To my fellow fans of the Birds of Prey comics, many of the Birds of Prey are quite different from their portrayals in the comics, but their relationships with each other are so true to the spirit of the series that the change in the movie really didn't bother me at all. You know, the theme of the comic is alive and well in this movie. And so even as like a Gail Simone purist, as it were, I totally am endorsing this Birds of Prey movie. Does anybody else want to chime in on the spoiler-free endorsement section?
I mean, I guess I'll just say that visually, this movie is absolutely stunning. Like the styling, every single time that the camera was on any of these women, I was like, they look so incredible. The set pieces were incredible. Everything about it, like, was just so fun. And the world felt really, really realized. I don't know. I just think the action's amazing, but visually every frame is gorgeous and fun. And I think that it's really nice when you see a movie and you're like, I can tell that the people working on this had a good time.
I also think like anybody who's denying themselves the opportunity to see this because they're a purist about the comics is not letting themselves have a good time. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Okay. So we're all telling you to go see the movie. And so you're going to go see the movie and then you're going to come back and listen to this. Because from here on, there be spoilers. One of the things that, coming to this myself, like I'm a big fan of the Birds of Prey comics. I do not consider myself a Harley Quinn expert. Like I know more than the next person because I read comics, but like she's not a character that I've focused my interest or fandom on. And so, to me, it was sort of like Harley Quinn is in this because this is the way that this Birds of Prey movie gets to be made. And like, God bless Margot Robbie for being like, this is how I want to use my Hollywood clout, and like getting a woman director, you know, on this and like really producing it and making it happen. The director is like someone whose own work, Kathy Yan, has like done indie stuff and stuff like that. You know, the script is by Christina Hodson. Like, there are just like women from the rafters like making this movie happen.
Yeah, it was so good.
Do folks like, are there things that you loved about the movie and did not expect to see?
Yes. So my thing that I loved about the movie and didn't expect to see was that all of the fight scenes are character specific, and I love it when that happens. I love when characters fight differently, and having drunk shit show Harley Quinn alongside, you know, really cool, swift, efficient Black Canary, all of that really worked for me.
That's a good way to describe her fighting skill. Yes. And like,
Yeah.
I liked how they connected her back to her mom. Like, I wasn't going to assume that that would happen, like with, you know, Black Canary Senior, as it were, but I love that they kept that in the story.
I know. So did I. I'm a sucker for that stuff. And she has sad mom feelings in it. And I've, you know, emotions. Had a great time.
I think that speaking like Harley Quinn's fighting style, actually, I didn't really think about that when I was watching it, but like it was so acrobatic, and it was like just like flips and everything, like incredibly, I don't know, I don't want to say clown-like, but you know what I mean, like circus performer-esque.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is very, that it was just fun to watch. Yeah.
My big insight, I think, on this is like, this isn't like a DC movie. This is a Warner Brothers movie, in the sense that Harley acts as a Warner Brothers cartoon. She is Bugs Bunny in this. She has this physical mastery of all the space around her. She's got like the Roadrunner thing where like everybody's trying to get her and they just trip over the rake every single time and they get smacked in the face. And she has her own gravity. And like, she doesn't have a literal superpower in this, you know, the way like Aquaman or the Flash does, but her superpower is basically having the physics of a Warner Brother cartoon surrounding her body at all times. And I love that. I don't know if they deliberately were like, hey, this is Warner Brothers, let's get like Warner Brothers about it. But for me, that was such a smart take.
Well, I mean, it even started, right? Like, it started animated with like kind of her telling her story, and it's like this kind of animated version of her going through her backstory really fast. And I mean, I'm going to disclose here that I'm actually not a comic reader, but I really never really read any Birds of Prey comics. I'm familiar with the characters individually just by like comics osmosis, but not from like reading the comics themselves. So I kind of had like a little bit of expectation going in, but not too much. So I'm not particularly married to the way that these certain characters should be represented. But I will say that personally, I think that the best comic movies are the ones that aren't afraid to be like, this was a comic. And I think that the kind of over the topness and like the high energy voltage stuff did remind me that it's like, yes, this is fun. This is a comic. And I know that not all comics have to be fun, but I think like when I think about my favorite comic movies like Spider-Verse or like Scott Pilgrim, I think about like the energy, like that comic energy. And I think this movie really had that. And I really enjoyed that.
Emma, I think of you as being someone who may have some particularly informed thoughts on one Harley Quinn. Like, how do you feel the movie handled the character or translated her or developed her in a new or different way?
I think it was kind of deeply middle of the road, I guess I would say. One thing I was thinking a lot about the setup of the movie and kind of where we find her is that a lot of superheroes have like a Groundhog Day thing that they constantly deal with, that they constantly go through. And I've been spending a few months working on a piece about Warren Ellis's Iron Man comic, Extremis, and it kind of talks about, I go into a lot about how he's gone through all these different conflicts, different wars, where origin gets rehashed, right? And it kind of gets updated, and you get a sense of, you know, where America is and its war machine and all of these kinds of ideas. And so Harley Quinn kind of has her Groundhog Moment day is when she breaks up with the Joker, because it happens again and again and again, and when we see it many times. So kind of, if you've been, like, I guess I've literally been watching Harley since she first debuted in the cartoon in like 1992 or whatever that was. But the kind of tough thing with Harley is if you've been watching her and reading her for a long time, then this is a well-worn thing. She's going to break up with the Joker, and you get the conversation with her roller derby skull where they're like, oh no, she's just going to go back to him. And that's a commentary on like the fact that has been the plot arc up until 2013, from 2013 until now, and obviously they're not ever going to get back together again, at least not in, I don't think, the next few years. But it is kind of a cycle that she goes through, and a cycle that we've seen before. So I think for longtime readers, there's a lot of pressure to be like, well, where are we going to take this Groundhog Day moment for her? And what are we going to do with it? And I think, and this is a really strange way to put this, but the tragic irony of the situation is that the movie loses something by not having access to a Joker. I don't know if we want to say Jared Leto's Joker specifically, or if they just kind of had a stand-in. But so we just kind of take it on faith that there was a breakup and off she goes. And so that's kind of, you know, like I said, it's a scenario that we've seen before again and again. Like if you've been following Harley for a long time, if you haven't, then it kind of feels like at least somewhat new territory. But I wouldn't really weigh it, yay, they did it amazingly, because I think you would have needed to have some depiction of the Joker to really dig into that and to really kind of be more explicit and more direct about the abusive dynamics of that relationship, you know, relative to, say, how Connor and Palmiotti have played it, or other, you know, more recent writers have played it. But I don't think there's any knocks against it. So that to me is kind of like, it comes out neutral.
That's interesting, because to me, like, I literally was saying, I love the Joker's absence in this, and that the only time you see him is in the animated flashback. I love how much he's like a non-concern. But you raise an interesting point, which is like, a lot of her behavior is only explicable if you truly understand how fucked up her relationship was. On the other hand, like, is the Joker's toxicity so different from that many men in the real world? Like, maybe not. Maybe we don't actually need to see it. I don't know. I'm kind of curious where other folks come down on that question. Should the Joker have been on camera or not?
I mean,
Sarah, this feels like a you thing.
I was very happy for him to be gone, but I also understand exactly what you're saying, because of course there was so much, you know, it's basically going from the animated series to, you know, today or something. It's like there's this whole middle period of growth that we just absolutely cut out. And I think that obviously is not true to how abusive relationships that are long-term tend to end, I guess. That it seems to be a much longer process. So I think I understand what you're saying with that. For my enjoyment, I was happy not to have that guy present. But you know, to me, it's like, we'll probably get back into their dynamic sometime soon. But then, of course, it's also, you know, I read tons of the comics, so, you know, I wouldn't know what it's like to watch it from the outside and be like, so what? You know, there's just a whole middle of this story that's completely missing. I wonder what happens.
But I think the big thing that we miss out on is if you go back to Suicide Squad, which I think kind of unfortunately, again, you kind of have to do thinking about it, because this is a sequel to that movie, right, and the marketing and the dynamics. And there was a lot of, I think, justified, you know, misgivings or opposition to the merchandise and all of this, and playing up the Joker and Harley as being this like Bonnie and Clyde cool thing that you buy the Daddy's Little Monster t-shirt and this kind of stuff at Hot Topic. And, you know, there's a lot of questions about like, marketing that dynamic to teens in particular, right? Because I think, and my whole thing is like, if you're a Joker Harley shipper and like you're an adult with a sensible understanding of BDSM dynamics and whatnot, then sure, you can have lots of fun with that. I mean, I'm not in that crowd personally, but I think that there's a carve out to be made there. But when you're spending millions on marketing and kind of how muddled those dynamics were in Suicide Squad because of the weird editing issues that film had,
yeah.
you never really got a strong sense. Like, did he push her out of the helicopter or did he not? I mean, it was so ambivalent because it kind of seemed to me like the studio wanted to back off from where David Ayer was going. And I guess only Ayer knows that. But to me, it's kind of that gap between how muddled the approach was in Suicide Squad, the way that the marketing played it up as them being like a cutesy emo Valentine, which is not really accurate to anything, and then to where we see it in the film. So it's you know, and it's, again, it's tragic that this film had to deal with so much of the baggage of the production difficulties and just the choices that were made in Suicide Squad. But that's kind of why I would position it that way and say I would have liked to see more of that, particularly because of the gaps around that issue in this franchise pre Birds of Prey.
Right.
To be clear, though, I didn't see Suicide Squad, and I mean, I'm familiar with all the characters, obviously, extremely well, but I didn't see the Suicide Squad movie, and I don't think it impacts people's enjoyment. What were you going to say, Nadia?
I was going to say that I think that the movie had a really hard thing trying to kind of trying to deal with the fact that there was no way they could actually put Joker in this movie, like in a physical presence, because it was so tied to Suicide Squad. It was kind of like Leto or nothing, and they kind of were like, and I honestly am very thankful that he wasn't in it. But I think that for me, the movie tried to kind of shape that into a point. Like when during this discussion, I can't help but think about that scene where Cassie Kane goes to Harley's apartment and sees the picture of Joker and is like, who's that? And Harley goes on like, oh, he's the clown prince of genocide or whatever, and like a bunch of like titles, like, you don't know who it is? And she's like, no, seems like a dick. And I was like, yep, I feel like this movie is, I'm not saying that it's earned, but I feel like this movie attempted to take this kind of absence and make it almost a point, make it to be like, you don't need the Joker to tell a Harley story. I mean, that's why she says that thing at the end where she was like, people shouldn't be afraid of Joker, or you people should be afraid of me. Again, I understand that wasn't like completely earned, and probably we're filling in the gaps some as comic fans, but that like, I think the movie attempted to make it purposeful and to varying degrees of success. I actually really liked the scene where Cassie was like, I don't know who that is, because honestly,
that was amazing.
Yeah, and I think that it almost speaks to this movie attempting to be for new fans rather than like old ones. Do you know what I mean? Like kind of, it's like this movie is like attempting to move forward, being like, this is we're looking for different people. We're looking for people who might not necessarily feel so intense about the Joker, you know, and be like, yeah. So, I mean, yeah. I don't. I lost the thread.
No,
at the end.
that was a great thread. I want to talk about the Cassandra Cain character, actually. I adore the character and the performance. It's so hard for it's so easy for like rascally scamp kid characters to be just obnoxious and worthy of eye rolling. And she was such a delight. This character bears literally no resemblance whatsoever to Cassandra Cain in the comics. And guess what? I don't fucking care. I admit that I'm not somebody who sat there like riveted by all the Cassandra Cain Batgirl comics or anything. But like, it would be so easy for a movie to just end up making a silent, orientalized, like Asian American character if they kept the character being like she was in the comics. Like, I don't think the comics did that in the end of the day, but that would be so easy for the movie to fall into if it's just part of one story. I mean, I could argue that maybe they should have renamed the character like Misfit or even Stephanie Brown, because I think that the origins, Misfit from Birds of Prey or Stephanie Brown, like from the Batman's books, because like a lot of Cassandra's personality, a lot of movie Cassandra's personality, in terms of her spunkiness, her irreverence, and her need to protect herself from adults who are exploiting her, but her also feeling like very modern and contemporary, and like a young person you would actually meet in New York. It felt like more like those other characters, more like that character. And so, I don't know. On balance, I would have maybe had her be named something else. But I'm totally cool with like the way that they chose to do this instead of the comics characterization, where she's a girl raised by an Asian assassin who never was taught how to speak so that she could be a fearless ninja. Like it's just full of problematicness.
That comic is very great, and they go in a different direction, and I love it. But also, Cassie Kane can be two things. There's tons of superheroes that are more than one version of themselves, I guess. That happens all of the time, and sometimes for the better and sometimes for the worse. But I mean, I can see being disappointed because you like saw Cassie Kane as one of the characters and you thought that you were going to get the comics version of that. But, the comics version even isn't consistent. Like after the Batgirl series ended, all of this other stuff happened. A lot of these characters aren't very consistent, like in the comics. So it's kind of whenever people are like, oh, that's not like it was in the comics. And it's like, maybe it's not like it was in the good comics or the comics that you like, but it is how it is in the comics because nobody has a Bible that they follow on these characters. Like, I mean, it would maybe be cool if they did, but I mean, like Roy Thomas in the Marvel universe wasn't always the best thing, and that eye for continuity wasn't always the best thing. So that's where I fall on it. Like, I love Cassandra Cain in the comics. This was a great character too. She was kind of necessary for the story, if they were going to do Harley Quinn starring in Charlie Chaplin's The Kid, then they needed a kid for sure. So yeah, I don't know. I was fine with it. I thought she was a really fun character.
I think, personally, the Cassandra Cain character was probably the only one that really worked for me in the movie. But, I really agree with Ilana's point where it was like, I don't know why this character is named Cassandra Cain. I mean, I didn't actually think of Misfit. I was definitely thinking more of, I think, what is her name? Bluebird?
Harper Row Bluebird, yeah.
Harper Row,
Who's a bird, yeah.
Or any of these other characters. The character itself is great, and the role that she plays is good. I kind of would really wish that they had really played up and explained. I may have really explained the joke, but really put it to us that the whole point of this character is that she's Harley's Robin at the end, right? That Harley adopts Robin the same way that Batman does, and they kind of leave it in the air without really addressing it. But I would have, the character worked for me, but I think the problem is it would have been easier to split the difference and say this was Harper Row, or if they made her a few years older, then it could have been Elysia Yo, and that would have been something really interesting.
Yeah.
But they also shot themselves in the foot in terms of the way that you can't do Cassandra Cain as that Batgirl anymore. And there are a lot of deep issues with her original appearances, and I really don't like that origin for a lot of reasons. But Batman and Robin Eternal took another swing at it, which I think is kind of what Sarah was alluding to. And that version, they did get to the point where she didn't really talk and she was traumatized, but Genevieve Valentine in particular had an issue where they really got to the way that she reads body movement early on with this incredible sequence out of ballet. And so you can take those broken pieces and build them into something that's a lot more positive or make some kind of sense outside of, ooh, she's a spooky ninja. And so I think it's too bad that road got closed off, because they kind of flipped through the archives like, okay, what do we name this kid? Cassandra Cain. But I thought her presence in her character as that kind of plucky foster kid was fun, even if it was a little bit of a retread of Shazam in some ways.
Oh no, I don't feel that. I mean, one of the things that for me really worked is like I'm usually super critical of any stories that assume that a woman who's like a grown woman is going to want to take care of a young woman and like take on some caregiver role. Like I resent the fuck out of that. But I really enjoyed Harley's relationship with Cassandra. And I think Emma, you nailed it, which is that it's her Robin. Because I was like, why is it that this relationship where this older woman is not older, but grown up woman has to take care of this tween age girl isn't bothering me the way it normally does. And like you nailed it, Emma. It's because it's Batman and Robin, but like for chaotic neutral. And I like that.
I mean, I think
like
that you
that.
could make an argument of that being like part of a problem of like the infantilization of Harley Quinn in like a really weird way. But I think that ultimately the thing that makes Cassandra Cain really, at least in this, like the Cassandra Cain of this movie, really compelling for me is that like, yeah, she's like a street urchin. She's like a hard kid. But like she also wants connection. Like she was completely open to kind of to being taken under Harley's wing, and I think that that's what made it organic. So if it being this instead of this character that's like, no, I don't need anybody. This kid was like, oh, absolutely, I'll rob a grocery store with you. Like, you know what I mean? So I think that's what made it work. Is just that the kid wanted to be there and like both of them wanted to be there,
That's cool. I one of the characters that that I've seen some interesting people weighing in on is Huntress. I have had a number of folks who are autistic say that the character of Huntress in this they connected to the character as as feeling like their own manifestation of autism as well, which is interesting. I obviously can't weigh in on that one way or another, but with the Huntress, it was sort of like, at first I felt like, because the panels from the Birds of Prey comics that I've been sharing most recently to get hyped for the movie involved like Helena like making some jokes, and then I was realizing that those are all stuff from later in her career. Like this is early in her career, Helena, and the Helena that I think of, I can totally see her beginning like the one in this movie. Like this being like her origin story phase where she's still practicing. I love the bit of her like practicing saying her name in the mirror, which I mean, that's an amazing thing. And one of the things that I think folks were connecting with from the autism side of it. That feels to me like, yeah, this is little baby Huntress before she ever meets the Birds of Prey in the comics. And I love how literally everybody in the cast is just awestruck with how hot she is. Like, I think that the real ship coming out of all of this is like Huntress / every individual other lady and the Birds of Prey.
Yeah. Anyone who knows me or seen my Twitter has known that I've absolutely lost my mind over this version of Huntress. She was my favorite character, not just because she was agonizingly hot, but also just because I think that she was hilarious in a way that I didn't expect. Just kind of like this insanely capable yet painfully awkward assassin who's like never had other girlfriends before, was just fantastic. I thought the practicing in the mirror bit was wonderful. I thought the thing about her hating it being called a crossbow was wonderful. I'm not 12, amazing. She was genuinely the breakout for me, and I think a lot of people. Again, not just because like we all want her to step on us, but also just because I think she's just, I don't know. I don't want to say the word relatable, but like, yeah, I think that anybody who's kind of socially uncomfortable or kind of like doesn't, hasn't made a lot of like relationships, maybe was like a little bit, kind of isolated as a kid and ended up making most of their relationships as adults will really recognize, like, oh yeah, this, I get this, you know what I mean? So I really liked it. And I liked that all the other characters, as you said, kind of all just supported her and were like, you're so cool. And she's like, yeah, am I? Like, no, you're amazing. You know, so that was also nice to see that support and camaraderie amongst like a group of ladies.
I loved Huntress. I also always have loved Huntress. I think that the first time I was reading Huntress stories were in the mid-90s probably, and she was getting into fights with Batman because she used lethal force on the Justice League. So she got kicked out of the Justice League, and I was like, she's so rad. So even now, I think that she is extremely rad. And I think that that's a good way of looking at the character, is like, maybe this is her early days whenever she's first going in, because she did just kill all the people. So it's like the beginning for her. Like, she'll be fighting with Batman and using lethal force on people that she shouldn't sometime very soon, I'm sure.
Oh, I enjoy that greatly. I think like so much of the pleasure of this movie is just watching these really different women and support each other and like just give each other a chance and validate each other like so much, even though they begin all having fistfights. Like, it doesn't assume that all women instantly all get along. It doesn't presume that all women all will get along. And Harley like sticks, actually screws a couple people over in the end there. So I think it did some very complicated dance of like scratching the itch to like show this camaraderie without acting like it's like all roses,
Yeah, no, I think that it did a great job of not feeling catty in a way that some people might come to expect. Like, people who've never been around women before expect that women are in a group. But I think that I like the part that got me in this movie that made me go like, this was written by, like, this is amazing, was the one part, this is female companionship at its height, is when they're fighting and Harley offers Dinah a hairband in the middle of the fight. Yeah. And I was like, this is the moment. This is the thing for me. This is the best thing that's happened in this whole film.
Yeah, it's so funny how much that took me out too, where I was just like, I've never seen that in a movie before.
Yeah, like, exactly. I was like, I've never seen that in a movie, but it's so real. This is the most like genuinely kind thing. Like, this is such a moment of kindness and perfection. I love it. So yeah, that was my moment where I was like, God, they nailed it. This movie nailed it. And I know it's so small, but that genuinely was the moment for me. I held my friend who I was sitting next to. I mean, I held her every time Huntress was on screen, but I also held her at that moment.
Yeah. That's a great discussion question, actually. Like, what are some other moments that you guys felt was like, oh, this movie was definitely made by women?
Just a lot of, I guess, the small interactions that were not, oh God, it's like every time we see a movie, almost like, I mean, it changes a little bit, but we're still looking at a genre that is so predominantly defined by men, I guess, that even when they're like, I'm going to write this woman, she's going to be a badass character, then it's like, then we have to deal with like badass character for the entire movie instead of, real character that has believable dialogue, all of that kind of stuff. And I do think that was all over this movie. Like, there were just a lot of scenes that you could tell they just like aren't really there, I guess, for other, like, it's not really there for that, I guess, is how it felt to me.
You see a lot of women eating food and talking about food and regarding food as a source of pleasure. And like,
right, yeah.
I always have a little bit of an itch around that when it's like, and all of these women are super thin. Although Cassandra is like a normal girl, which is nice. But like, even so, I mean, it was still like, this is definitely women who like appreciate food and are talking about food. And it had a sort of weird food sensuality in that. And like, obviously everybody went and got an egg sandwich as soon as the movie was done. At least I know I did. Did anybody else get an egg sandwich immediately after the movie?
I ate tater tots because I was at the dine-in theater. So So
well, there you go.
I didn't eat anything else. I'm vegetarian too, so I was like, can I have tater tots?
I went to the Alamo Draft House, so I had food with there, but egg bodega egg sandwiches are a very large part of my diet. So like I was like, I mean, it was well described, the dash of hot sauce, even though I will take issue with the bodega guy being named Sal. I've never met a bodega guy named Sal. Like, that is not an accurate. I know it's Gotham, but it's not accurate, and I was mad about it.
Yes. And she said he was Armenian, and I'm like, that's legit, but I don't know. That's not the name I would have.
Yeah, that's not the name I would have gone for. I was a little bit. I can't believe. Again, I think this is the first negative thing I've said about this movie. And I'm just like, it took me out of it. I was like, there's no way this. Maybe Sam, maybe George. But not Sal. What the hell? What is that short for?
That's Salvatore.
It is Harley Quinn talking. I don't think there's any indication that that's what this guy's name really is.
Good point.
That's true.
But I mean, that moment, it kind of just sort of came and went for me. But it was one of those small moments that kind of brought back the kind of stuff that Jimmy Palmiotti and Amanda Connor did, and sort of the point that in those comics, it is like it's New York. She's in Brooklyn, right? It's not Gotham City, and it was weird because it felt to me so like tonally correct to the Palmiotti Connor run, but it also just sort of really emphasized to me just how underbaked this version of Gotham is. Relative to like Tim Burton or Joel Schumacher, and I mean this goes back to because they're using basically the same idea and image of Gotham that Batman versus Superman used and Suicide Squad used. And I was just like, where's like the huge architectural pieces? Where's the sense that this is Gotham City? It's just I don't know. I was like, this is neat, but it's not the Palmiotti Connor Brooklyn. It's supposed to be Gotham.
I think to me, like, it all felt like it was in Chinatown and environs. Like, she lives in Chinatown. The market they were running through was in Chinatown. Chinatown, like, you can go all the way from there to the piers on the East River. Like, this all just sort of felt like a very specific slice of Lower Manhattan. And, like, even the fancy shit, like, that could be Tribeca. You know what I mean? But it was interesting. Like, I was watching the movie and questioning, like, is this supposed to be like Gotham as New York, or like where do they want me to be situating it? But it felt like Chinatown to me. As someone who has spent a good amount of time running around there, I was like, yeah, no, this is Chinatown. This feels right.
Yeah, no, as somebody who literally lived my entire life here. Yeah, no, I actually completely agree with that point, Emma. I was like, this is just New York. Like where, I think that's very, very true. It's just New York. And I think that can be a little bit distracting. But I wasn't sure if the movie was just honestly leading into it at that point. Just like a nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Like, yeah, Gotham.
Well, speaking of New York, Nadia, let's talk about Harley Quinn's accent, because I had heard that like the only good thing in the Suicide Squad movie was Margot Robbie's performance. And I was very willing to go along with that. And I could certainly tell her physical performance was great. But when I heard her speak in the advertisements for the movie, I was a little bit like, this accent doesn't quite seem right. And it's a little bit, I don't know if I can listen to a whole movie of this.
Yeah,
then once I got in there, I was like, oh no, this is completely fine.
Yeah, I think I mentioned it to you earlier where I was like, I was a little bit nervous, especially when it opened on narration, that I was like, oh no, because I'm going to be very honest here and say I really can barely stand Margot Robbie's Harley voice, just because the accent, not because my dad has a heavy Brooklyn accent. It's not that the accent gets me. It's wrong. Like there's something off about the accent, and and I can't figure out where it is, but it just doesn't sound like any. It's not like an Italian Brooklyn accent. It's not like a South Brooklyn accent. It's not even like a Jersey accent. Like I don't know where it's just incorrect, and it grates me, and I don't want it to. And I obviously at some point in the movie I just kind of like let it go, but then like sometimes it would pop up, like when she was like, yes, I'm just a terrible person, and I was like, what is that? but you know, so like I think the voice, it was consistent, but it was consistently incorrect. However, it still did not. The movie was so good that to me, at least, that it didn't dampen my enjoyment of it. At some point, I just kind of gave in to this like bizarro land version of New York, Gotham, in which Harley is the only one with a bad accent.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that kind of goes back to Arlene Sorkin, right? Who was the original voice actress of Harley, really kind of played that stuff up. And I mean, I would assume that Margot Robbie is trying to match what Sorkin did. Mm-hmm. And it's always kind of like, what is it? Because Palmiotti and Connor, they do sometimes do like a really affected what do you call phonetic, version of this bizarre cartoonish Canarsie accent. But if you go back to Paul Dini, he's throwing Yiddish in there too. So there's always been a real kind of like a shit mix of what it is that Harley's voice and background are supposed to be.
Absolutely.
Right?
I mean, I think that the thing that gets me about the Margot Robbie's voice is that I started, like, my introduction to Harley was Batman the Animated Series, even though it's obviously much later than it came out, because when it came out, I wasn't even born yet. But, like, I watched it as a kid. And I loved her voice. Like, Harley was like a bit, like, I loved Harley in the animated series, and I could listen to her talk for hours. So I don't know what it is about Margot Robbie's Harley voice that gets me in comparison to animated series Harley's voice, which I can't get enough of. I love. So I don't know what it is. It's just something's off for me.
Well, I definitely want to talk at least a little bit about the costumes and outfits and clothing, which were outrageously good. It was fascinating to see so many straight men misunderstand them on the internet in advance and to then laugh at them for them being dumb and wrong. There's like a number of Black Mask suits that people should probably buy me.
Yes.
Get on that. But yeah, like Emma, I also wanted to get your thoughts about the fashion aspects of this.
Oh goodness. Well, I guess congratulations to Harley on doing a smash and grab at a Nordstrom's, but I mean that it honestly alienated me hugely. I get it. It's an aesthetic, and there's a design streak that runs through all of her outfits. But I'm just kind of like, it felt to me like somebody just sent a shopper out to Nordstrom and was like, okay, bull primaries and like shiny stuff, and off we go. I mean, the outfits top to bottom, they all fit together very nicely. But that whole aesthetic running through it, and I guess part of it is because we're still, again, kind of dealing with the leavings of the Snyderverse, and kind of where that left them for aesthetic grounds. But I was kind of like, to me, it just didn't fit. It just didn't work as Harley for me, because a key part of why I love the Connor Palmiotti stuff so much is when they move her to Brooklyn, they move her out to Coney Island, and they really brought, because especially Jimmy Palmiotti, because he tells these stories and he's very colorful about New York life, just even on Twitter and elsewhere. But they dig into the burlesque scene, they dig into the roller derby scene, and kind of like the carny stuff, and just sort of like what those lifestyles are and what those costumes are, and they're, because it is a great part in the movie where it's like, when does she have time to do a costume change? She should be doing a million costume changes a movie. But to me, it all kind of felt like it was, a lot of high-end designer stuff that was tailored to make that look, as opposed to things that really, from the ground up, evoked the kind of like where Harley comes from and sort of what her organic fan base has been. Because the fun thing, when she broke out of the old like Harley, like the classic cartoon costume, and they started going through these changes from Palmiotti and Connor on, I mean, not the stupid video game, and not the new 52 Suicide Squad looks, not those Spirit Halloween, disaster capitalism, sort of Halloween costume looks, but the later stuff was that they're like, okay, who is the fan base? Who has loved Harley this entire time? You know, it is roller derby girls, it is burlesque performers in this, and they integrated those stylistic elements into the costumes, and I just didn't see that here. I mean, I saw a look that fit together, but to me, it was more subtractive than additive to the character to me.
Oh, so I was just watching a video with them where they were talking about cosplaying, right? And how they always get their ideas from cosplayers and stuff. So it was exactly what you were saying.
About connecting it back to what the fans were like looking for.
Yeah, like the people who like they see at conventions and the people who they see around building Harley's look for them. Which, yeah, I can definitely see how that's different from what you see in the movie for sure.
I really loved her like really embroidered sequin outfit from the last scene in particular. That made me very happy.
I was honestly crazy about all of the costuming. I thought that I just loved it. I just thought everything that was worn felt like a character. And yeah, and I felt like it was kind of toned up and toned down at the same time. And in the sense of like, I felt like this was a hyper aesthetic universe in which everyone looked like so perfectly put together in their own sense of fashion. I'm going to talk about Huntress again. Loved her tracksuits. Would die for that. But like, I think that for me, it was sort of casual Harley, but amped up. I mean, even Black Mask, like all those velvet suits, you know, absolutely gorgeous. I was really like gaga all over the costumes, but I think that it is really interesting because again, I am coming from a place in which I don't have the connective tissue from the comics because those just didn't happen to be the comics I read. And I kind of read a lot of like comics adjacent to that. Like I read a lot of Batman. I watched the animated series and but I didn't read I read like Gail Simone's Batgirl run. So like that kind of stuff where it's like, it was like sort of touching, but not touching. So I do think it's really interesting to hear from you, Emma, who has like such a grounded foundation in the comics world, like, and how different our experiences were.
Well, let's talk about Black Mask and Victor Zsasz just a bit. I think I had heard before the movie came out that they like that. I don't know like what people were saying, if they were supposed to say that the characters are supposed to be played as being gay or not. And I still don't know if that's what people are trying to say or not. But I'm very cautious around having gay villains because that's like a complicated trope to lean into all the damn time. But in this, we had a story where we have Renee Montoya, who is like portrayed as a lesbian who has lesbian relationships, and Harley, who in her little pre-episode, her early in the movie animated sequence, it does show one of the people who she's matched up with in the little bingo thing to be a woman. Like, I was like, well, if they want to do that with them, then that's okay, because it's not like the only characters are going to be like queer villainy. But one of the things that I think made it work okay also, though, is that the Black Mask's villainy is not connected to any of his flamboyance at all, actually. And because those things are separated, I was like pleasantly surprised and reassured that this was actually not a portrayal that was going to make me uncomfortable. I mean, in the end, I think that we had a super unhinged misogynist piece of shit, and getting him blown up was just delightful. I mean, all of the fucking men in this movie had it coming to them. Even the ones where you don't know how bad they had it coming to them until later, like the guy whose face had the clown tattoo onto it. For a second, you're like, oh my God, that's horrific. But then you find out, oh, he killed Huntress's family. These are just part of the beautiful display and array of terrible men who had it coming to them. But yeah, like what do folks think about Black Mask and Victor Zsasz in the movie?
For me, I thought that they were both very scary. There were a lot of parts of their just their kind of general acting, I guess, that was pretty unsettling on top of all of the things that would normally be unsettling about those two characters. And their kind of weird relationship with each other honestly kind of made sense to me in a weird way. And also, I don't know. I feel like even if, I mean, Harley Quinn is also kind of a villain too. So I mean, and I would consider her to be, you know, it's like queer people can't all be heroes either. It's just the fact that we've seen so many villains that's like the problem, right? But for me, this was like, I don't know. Yeah, it was the same kind of. I didn't really have any issues with it just based on the fact that I was like, you know, they're gonna end this movie probably blown into little pieces, and that was exactly what happened to, I believe, at least one of them. So
yes. And how?
Well, I mean, Zaz, like the platinum blonde, like Evan Ross Katz look, like that's definitely not a heterosexual thing. That's
right.
We can all agree on that. I was like, for a second, I was like, oh, does he act? Is that who that is? No, it's not. But, and like, I was really late to the game in figuring out who that was supposed to be. I guess I just didn't focus on his facial scars, and I was like,
right.
It's so weird because you get this huge info dump about who he is, like right before he's done, and I'm like, no, Zaz is like he's like a fourth tier Batman villain at best, because he is just a serial killer who cuts himself every time he kills somebody. It's weird, who knows? But I was also like, really, we're just gonna one and done him, you know? And so that was too bad, because I was like, especially because the performance was so strong. I thought he did a way better job than Ewan McGregor did. I mean, McGregor was fine, but Zaz was the real, you know, giving you like a camp and a performance and really kind of going for it, when I kind of felt like Black Mask was pulled in a couple different directions sometimes. But the big thing for me with Black Mask is that it ran into the same problem that I felt like Hustlers did. Because Hustlers was like the stripper movie with Jennifer Lopez and whatnot. The thing with that is they really felt like they had this big slam dunk message about the financial crisis, and the guys that they were going after were you know, working for the banks and the other financial services companies that plunged everybody into that mess. But the morality of that movie moved it in different directions, like, oh, but these guys have families too, and you're sort of like, where is that in here? And I felt the same way with Black Mask, because there's a bunch of dialogue that you really have to be paying attention to understand why he's living in that shitty loft to begin with, right? That he's a fail son. Like, this is the whole point. Like, he is the Succession version of a Batman villain. But I don't feel like they built that up. And it was especially strange to see relative to what Harley Quinn Breaking Glass did with the Joker, where I guess I don't want to spoil that comic too much if you haven't read it, but they do build it up with this big family that's doing huge things in the city. Because you can see his family's company name on the building that Cassandra Cain lives in. And you really got to kind of
Janus
squint.
Corporation. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, to catch this stuff. And you really have to pay attention to these, I guess, kind of trope delivery text to pay attention to. And I'm like, no, show us more. Give it, like, tie those threads together. So I think he could have been a much stronger villain if A, they had really kind of dug into that more, and B, if the damn mask had melted onto his face like it's supposed to.
Yeah. Yeah, no.
Yeah.
I think...
Oh, man, but that part where he's showing around, like, the African art, that was, to me, just... I was so scared of him in that moment that it was just... that jumped out at me. But it's just in moments, right? There's no, like, cohesive whole that they're working towards with this guy.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that his relationship to ownership is, like... was amazing. I mean, I think that, you know, I think that that I actually really agree with everything you said, Emma. I think that the kind of fail son storyline is like really fascinating as kind of an impetus for this deeply misogynistic man to like want to prove himself. But I think that that they really nailed it with like that rich kid feeling like you own everything, that like rich man shit. That kind of energy of like, oh, this person, you know, he feels like he owns Dinah. He feels like he owns, you know, like these all these artifacts, and the way he feels that he owns the loyalty of everyone who works for him, the way he feels that he owns everyone who steps foot in his club, and he can do whatever he wants, and that at any point that sense of control is even remotely threatened, he just falls apart because he feels so. And I thought that one scene in his club where he forces that woman to dance on the table was genuinely one of the most terrifying. It was awful. It was awful to watch. Yep. I was so scared. And I was scared for Dinah too. And I really appreciate that they didn't make her do something in that moment, because especially, the power dynamic, especially with her being, kind of the employee, a woman of color, to this dangerous, violent, terrifying man, the truth of the matter is that you can't always act in those moments, and the way that kind of fear just permeates you. It was just, I felt like that was kind of the real moment where I felt him as a villain, the real moment where I was like, okay, I get what this guy is beyond just like, he's a rich asshole.
Yeah. And then Zaz just starts like laughing. That was so whack too.
I think one of my big moments of this movie was made by women was the fact that they did not try to make that scene sexy. There was like nothing, like there would have been something totally freaking male gaze about how they were looking at that woman on the table, except they just didn't do it because they really understand the actual point is to be scary.
Well, there's another point there, though, where Zaz comes out the stronger character even in that scene, because, like, when he can go either way, he can either de-escalate or escalate the situation, because, Black Mask isn't sure what the guy is laughing. Is he laughing at me? And, Zaz is like, yes, he is.
Yeah.
He's pushing him over there, right? And and that's the thing where if I, like... And who knows, but if I had to guess, if there was a movie that inspired those two, it's probably and now I'm flaking on the name of it. It's an oh my god, it's a Takashi Miike film, like a really brutal exploitation film. It's the one where Tadanobu Asano has the Glasgow smile, where he has all those scars.
Yeah, that's Old Boy, right?
No, Old Boy is a Korean movie. It's Chan-wook Park. No, this is Ichi the Killer.
Yeah.
The Killer.
Oh my god, yeah.
Because it's the whole sadism thing, but the whole thing is that his mob boss disappears, and he knows that the guy is dead, but he's just like torturing all of these people because he can't deal with the fact that his boss is gone. And he had this really weird, like, BDSM relationship with that boss. So you can see Zaz just waiting to break out into that full role. But you can also see with the scars and the blonde hair that, and just the flamboyance of everything, that I wouldn't put it past them to have been inspired by Ichi the Killer, which I don't necessarily recommend you watch.
Yeah. Oh my God, Emma, I think you nailed it. I think you freaking nailed it. I don't think anybody's noticed that yet. And I think you're 100% right. You heard it here, folks, ladies and gentlemen, on Graphic Policy Radio. Although I also think that, like, I haven't heard anybody else talk about the Bugs Bunny thing yet, so I'm going to still pat myself on the back for that moment. I think also, like, is it possible that cocaine is the source of her powers?
It was. I mean, for a second there.
Yeah, exactly. In that one room. Oh, let's talk about Rosie Perez as Renee Montoya. I was so excited to have Rosie be in something. I love that they were not making her try to, like, they like let her look like, I actually don't know how old she is, but they didn't try to make her look like she was 12, Mm-hmm. And I liked how they just seemed to like respect her performance as an actress, but also sort of lampshaded that, like, we're going to do this 80s cop hard-boiled thing, and people are going to know that that's a shtick within the story. I noticed that the thing with her talking to her ex-girlfriend is that the way it's set up, like, if you were watching this movie in America in English, it's 100% clear that, like, this is Rosie having a fight with her ex-girlfriend. It says it in the text on the graphic. But I know that they're going to take that out when they show it in some other countries, because the stuff that says that this is her ex-girlfriend is all written on the screen in English.
Yeah, and if you cut that one scene, you can be forgiven for not knowing that that's the scenario. And I feel so ambivalent about it because Rosie Perez as Renee Montoya, she has to be in the top 5 best superhero castings of all time.
Yeah.
Robert Downey Jr., John Bernthal, those like the ones that are like, you look like the character, you live the character. But I mean, that's the kind of thing with Harley too. You see on the slot machine that she had a female romantic partner, but these are blink and you miss it things in an $80 million budget R-rated movie. Like, I think it's really such a shame that they couldn't push this any further. And I mean, I guess and I don't know if this is true, but if Warner Brothers locked up Poison Ivy and said, no, we don't want to use her here because we might use her for, another full-on Batman movie. But it's kind of like, this is as far as we get. And this might be, again, too much like fan baggage or something, but to me, the biggest heartbreak in this movie was her last scene where she packs up her boxes and quits the force because her boss took credit for her work. I mean, yeah, it sucks when your boss takes credit for your work, but like, they blew away any chance of the Gotham Central story of Half a Life, of one of the defining LBGT storylines of the decade. It has to be number 2 or 3 for DC behind, Joe Winning's brother's Keeper. Like, that was a huge deal. And they're just kind of like, all right, she quits the force, now she's running the birds. And I was like, what? So no chance of this. Ugh. Shattering.
I mean, but of course, like this is a movie that basically agrees that the cops are fucking terrible and that everybody calls the cops the pigs the whole time. And there is a sort of pleasure in that.
I don't know, because, I mean, I feel ambivalent about it because I didn't feel like there was a substantive critique of police power, but also Harley goes very far out of her way to shoot police with a beanbag gun, right? And then there's a lot of great hilarity of cops getting hit in the face by beanbag guns, and I'm sure that anybody who's been hit in anywhere in the body by an NYPD beanbag gun was like, yeah, right? Fun, but it was so weird because she goes in there and and that's a great sequence. I love how they shot that.
Oh my God.
They cribbed it entirely from Injustice. So shout out to Tom Taylor and his team for that one. But she goes through this whole sequence of being very careful not to kill anybody. Then the biker gang busts in and it's like, blam, 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 we're going to murder all these people. Then we're going to get high on coke and go nuts. And it's just sort of, it was just weird. It's like, did they have a Blue Lives Matter consultant on the film that was like, okay, but you got to stop here?
I mean, it's almost more hilarious and shaming to them that like she's not killing them. She's just like humiliating them, like the entire force humiliated. I mean, I think like with the thing with the police here there isn't a critique of policing in the sense that most of the sin that we see of the police is that they care more about jostling for status and superiority over Rosie Perez, over Renee Montoya than they do about actually solving crime. But like, that's still something. Like saying this police force cares more about like looking cool than actually like, and claiming women's work as their own than actually, solving a crime or protecting a girl or any of that stuff,
Right. I mean, I feel like there's so much of this that just has to be taken as read, right? Like the queerness has to be taken as read. Maybe somebody else can watch it and be like, I just really like that they didn't kill any of the cops. Like the Blue Lives Matter crowd maybe like would watch this and be really stoked on it. Maybe.
Oh my God. I hope not.
It's hard for me to understand the other side of thoughts. But I would say that, yeah, I don't know. I think that they did a lot in a short amount of space, but then again, like it is an R-rated movie, and I think I agree with all of that.
I think it's always okay to ask for more from a film.
Yeah.
So if we're asking for more explicit queerness, we're asking for more like discussions about why cops are pigs rather than just calling them pigs. Like, I think that's totally valid. We could always ask for more. But I at least appreciate, I feel like I can appreciate as that they went as far as they went. I think that you're totally right that it was totally humiliating, that scene, and very fun to watch her storm into a police station and like just kind of flex on everyone in there. But yeah, no, could have been more, always could have been more. We'll always want more.
That's our job. It's true.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of more, one of the things that I'm glad they did in a limited way was, this is a movie that in which superpowers are like basically not a thing other than, Harley Quinn's got her Warner Brothers Bugs Bunny up superpower. But otherwise, the only time we see a superpower is Black Canary using her canary cry at the very end and it wipes her out. Right. And I liked how the movie was sort of saving the superhuman to be used as an exclamation rather than having this be a story with like lots of superpowers happening all through it. I think it kept the movie special. It made it clear why, why Black Canary isn't just going around acting like a superhero all the time. And like, it made the stakes be really clear. And I loved the image of having Harley be like, all these men are being knocked over, but Harley's being powered forward on the power of her voice. Do you folks have thoughts about the powers?
I loved that. And I also loved the fact that, like I said, probably the thing that drew me in through this entire movie was just how the fight scenes are all shot. And that kept me completely engaged from beginning to end, I think. So yeah, I thought that was great. I love subtle use of power that then suddenly is like bombastic, right? Because that's how I would think it would be. So yeah, I loved that. I loved all of the action sequences, even the stuff that's completely improbable, where she's, on roller skates behind a car or whatever. That is maybe not how that works. Maybe she'd hit a, pothole and would die, but she doesn't. And I don't know. I thought that all of it was very cartoony and very fun to watch.
Yeah.
Well, if Christian Slater could do it on a skateboard, including the cube.
And he did.
That is a deep cut.
I could not think of anything else during that whole part. I was just like, oh my God, it's like this kitchen scene in that movie, except it's Harley on roller skates, which was amusing. But I was like, and that's kind of why a lot of people argue that movies are too long these days, and I'm just like, no, just go back to Netflix. If you want to watch a movie, watch a movie. If you want to watch a Quibi series, watch a Quibi series, is my opinion. And it's like, even Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I was like, no, I like these extended driving scenes. I like this stuff. I like living this world. So I'm like, I just wish in this one that there was more of an emotional punch to the roller skates. If we had gotten a few more minutes of Harley's roller world, or if they had just kind of out of nowhere brought her roller team in, they're like, oh yeah, we're gonna, whip for it. Like if you've seen Ralph Breaks the Internet, when the Disney princesses all show up again to cantilever him into the position to save the day, or that silly Final Fantasy cartoon years ago that it did kind of the same thing. Like let's if we're gonna get this cheese ball, let's really get this cheese ball. But I guess they didn't have the time and the budget for more roller skates, so it's okay.
I would say at no point in this movie was I bored, and at no point at this movie was I looking at the White Watch at all, right? Christ, I didn't even really mention the music cues. I should say I am ridiculously critical of the soundtrack of everything, and I feel like the things that most people choose for almost anything are basic as fuck, etc. This made me so happy. They didn't fucking use Cherry Bomb. They used I Hate Myself for Loving You, and they used it in a way that made perfect sense in the story. They were doing great song selections, and even when they were a little bit obvious, they were obvious in a great way. Mm-hmm. Any other thoughts on the soundtrack, folks?
I really like the soundtrack. Again, there was something about it that did make me think of Scott Pilgrim. I don't know. It was just kind of like the really fun fight scenes to really fun music, I guess. And it was just like, yeah, this is, the energy is there. It's really fantastic. Yeah. I also am kind of critical of soundtracks. And I think this one was very, very fun. And I was surprised.
My brother always tells the story of whenever I was watching Thor Ragnarok, and the second that Led Zeppelin starts playing in that one fight scene, he just looked over and saw my face go from normal to just a deep frown. And so I would say that anything that's kind of like that feels pandering soundtrack wise also does not work for me, to say the very least. And this was great. I thought that all of the soundtrack worked perfectly, honestly. And yeah, that is pretty rare, I guess.
I hated the music cues.
Wow.
To me, it was one of the big things. There were so many like stylistic and technical things that they brought forward from Suicide Squad that they kept doing.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me was one of them. And I was like, did nobody learn any of the lessons of Suicide Squad? Because like the editing and pacing and the music cues to me felt like that they were different music and whatnot, but it kind of felt like it had the same philosophy. And I was just like, no, just give me a real score to this movie. Mm-hmm. And the one that killed me, that just made me want to crawl under my seat, was the Pat Benatar cover.
Oh,
okay. But I was like, are they trying to be sarcastic? If they're being sarcastic, they're not giving me sarcastic from this scene. And it's just like, it's the same as the I Started a Joke and like all of these movie trailers. Like was it a cover of Bjork in that terrible Terminator trailer? It was a great movie, but with the hunt or whatever, and it's just like, what? I don't know. I was just kind of like, oh no.
I'm thinking now about like the New Mutants preview and how every high school movie has The Wall by Pink Floyd or whatever.
Part 2. And I freaking groaned. It's so embarrassing.
It really upsets me pretty regularly.
It's upsetting. I don't know who needs to know, but there's other Pink Floyd songs. And there's other songs about like being forced into enter in a machine and like, it just kills me. It's yeah. I would understand that we landed very different places on this. I would also say that I'm not super familiar with any of the contemporary stuff on the soundtrack. So like, I'm like, I didn't know that's Megan Thee Stallion, the Stallion. You know what I mean? Like that's just not like
that. I was hyped as fuck for, and I loved. And I was like, please just make this the whole thing. I was like, if these were more of the music cues, I've been super excited for that. The actual like soundtrack album of this movie is brilliant. All like the Doja Cat and like Normani and Megan Thee Stallion. Like it's just an incredible, great curation. But they didn't highlight it enough in the movie, I felt like. And they went to old things and they went to the Pat Benatar cover, and it's like, no, give me more of this. Like give us something like the Meek Mill track in Creed, right?
I'm assuming that they couldn't like afford the actual Pat Benatar song and decided that it would be interesting to have it be in a different tone at that moment. That's my guess. But like they have Barry White, and it was Barry White but like they had, I love the way they used "I'm Gonna Love You Just a Little Bit More, Baby." Like it's like, I don't know, like there was lots of stuff that made me very excited as an old person who likes the old things and also hates everything all the time. Like to have like contemporary music in it that didn't make me want to scream and punch people is pretty, like in a bad way, is like pretty noteworthy. Like I'm going to actually check out some of the hip hop artists on this. I mean, these particular tracks of theirs, etc. So we're coming up on time, and are there things that we want to make sure to hit before the moment is over?
I'd like to talk just a little bit more about Black Canary, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about Black Canary.
I don't know. I thought that she was really good in this movie. Again, I kind of just liked the movie. I enjoyed her as just kind of, I mean, it doesn't get very deep into her character, obviously, but it is really nice just to kind of see Dinah be morally torn, kind of like in that situation that we saw her be in so many times in Birds of Prey, even though, I mean, it's different, but it's morally the same, I guess. Just kind of seeing Dinah be torn and having to make hard decisions, I think is one of my favorite dynamics of Birds of Prey in the comics. So I loved that. And I thought that the actor was so good. I enjoyed her a lot.
I loved her a lot too. I felt like I really appreciated her. I really appreciated the way that she was placed in those positions, especially since now she's, this character is being played by a woman of color, and the way that specifically you kind of find yourself in these situations in which you're not sure how to, because the other person has more power of you in this sense, like a physical and a financial one, and just kind of all over. And the way that you can find yourself in positions where you want to do good, but like the danger is to you and you don't know how to navigate that. I felt like that was captured really well, even though she could have, like, we know she has superpowers. We know she could have blasted his ass across the room. But like, that's just not how that always works. Even if you are the more powerful person, you can feel small. And I think that the performance really resonated with me for that reason, that I was like, I really understand this position that she's in. And I'm so glad that she, kicks ass and gets out of it at the end in the way that she does. And,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like you can really see the performance of like her as someone who like wants to be a good person, but mostly wants to survive. And this tension between, and like seeing how her mom was like left out on a fucking limb to like die and be killed for sticking her neck out. Like the performance is really great. Yeah. And her singing was good.
Oh yeah. I thought that like one little part where, the glass breaks when she hits the high note, I was like, oh, fun,
But driving a Jaguar instead of a motorcycle.
Really?
Okay, true.
Really?
That's true.
That's true.
That's true.
That's what Harley had to steal it. That was the only way to make it right. Now she's going to have to get a motorcycle.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, I get that it was integral to the plot because she had to be Black Mask's driver. But, like, maybe he just likes hanging on back on a motorcycle. Maybe he does. Maybe that's his thing.
That's a better visual for me, but probably a lot more uncomfortable for Dinah, unfortunately.
It's probably more uncomfortable for Zaz, who's definitely going to try to get on that bike.
Oh, God, you're right.
See, now that is what... No, then that's where you get the sidecar. Zaz has his own little sidecar.
Okay, I'm sold. Hell yeah. I want that movie.
See? Problem solved. Sidecar.
This is highly disturbing and amazing at the same time.
Yeah, no. I mean, my dad drove a Jaguar. Like, my dad bought a vintage Jaguar when I was a kid, and it was like the worst car. And that's all I could think about the whole movie is just like, do you know how hard parking is going to be for that fucking Jaguar? Like,
well, that's how you know it's not actually in New York.
Yeah,
like,
that's
nobody
true. They
in New
have
York
parking
has a nice car.
in Gotham.
Like, not even just that, but like, nobody has a nice car in New York. It's going to get like destroyed in like 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Like, why would you do that?
Yeah,
that's ridiculous. That's very alien to me. Well, I want to end on one really quick note, because like one of the things that I was really excited about this movie, right, was like how Marco made sure that women were actually doing all the cool shit behind the camera, not just in front of it. So I want to end with asking folks to do a quick shout out to a recent movie made by a woman that might not be a major studio superhero release that you want to make sure folks know to see, whether it's in the studio, whether it's out in the theaters or not. Right now, I am always telling everybody to go watch The Love Witch, which is like the most perfect feminist B-movie exploitation, completely set in a fully realized, gorgeous 1968 California town, but shot a couple of years ago, available for rental. And it is like feminist and campy and stunning. And it's, of course, about witches and Satanism and killing men. And it has the director is the writer, and she does all the art direction, and she wrote the songs. It's like the most like singular vision for a piece of art you could possibly imagine. And everything about it is just gloriously over the top and brilliant. Like, to have something so feminist and so campy and so smart and so aesthetically polished in one thing, it's just like nothing like this happens.
I would love to shout out The Farewell. I think that was a movie that was agonizingly snubbed this award season, and I was very disappointed by that. But I think that it is an incredible movie, just absolutely beautiful. The performances were all excellent. I haven't cried that much at a movie since like the first time I watched Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind when I was 14 or something. Like, it was just amazing. I think that also I've never seen a film that so accurately captured the kind of Generation 1.5 experience of not really fitting into either culture, which is what happens when you come to America as a really young child. And I think that it was also just absolutely incredible I think that it was such a quintessentially immigrant American, especially, story that did not get seen that way, because we don't view stories that aren't in English as American stories, even if they are. So I think that
disgusting how it was labeled as a foreign movie when it's not.
Yeah, it absolutely isn't. I think that it's like a must see for everyone, just kind of like a basic touchstone of empathy. And I think that it especially kind of touched beautifully on the way that women in families are meant to kind of carry emotional weight and their roles and guilt. And it was just everything about it was exceptional. I haven't seen a movie that has been quite so impactful to me in a very long time. So The Farewell, 100%.
Emma?
I'm gonna go with Zero Dark 30. No, I'm kidding.
I'm sorry.
That was.
I stopped breathing for a full moment. Like, no, I'm leaving right now.
I will not be choosing Zero Dark 30 is my choice. I'm just gonna keep riding the train that I've been riding for the last 10 months and just say Booksmart,
so
and
good.
again
Very
Booksmart. Especially for Billy Lord, who is just freaking amazing, and like Olivia Wilde just nailed it. And it's just there's like little things that you don't typically see, even in like LGBT inclusive movies, like the whole idea of just like a straight girl and her. Well, actually, we don't know what her orientation is. Sorry, we don't know. I shouldn't say that. Right. She can be bi. We don't actually know. But like one girl having a crush on a guy and one girl having a crush on a girl, and like their crushes hook up at the party together, and you're like, whoa, this has literally never happened in a Hollywood teen movie ever. So that's cool. But just as a quick shout out, because I can't fully endorse because I haven't seen it yet. But Jen and Sylvia Soska, the local Vancouver icons, the twin sister horror movie directors, have just done a remake of David Cronenberg's Rabid, and it's on like VOD and stuff in the US, but it is in theaters in Canada now.
I'm going to Canada very soon, and I'm very glad you said that, because now I know what I'm looking up.
Thank you.
Yes.
That's amazing. I'm so excited. I'm going to watch that online. And Sarah, what are you going to tell us to see?
I'm just going to say Tigers Are Not Afraid by Issa Lopez, which was basically just a really sad, it's very Pan's Labyrinth, I guess, as far as just being kind of a tragic yet fanciful childhood story. And it's beautiful and really good. I watched tons and tons and tons of movies, but this was one that stayed with me for a long time.
Beautiful. Well, thank you all for listening. Folks, Graphic Policy Radio is on every platform you can think of for podcasts. I would love to get people's reviews, and you can help us spread the word about the show. I'm on Twitter a little bit too much, and you can give me feedback there. ELANA_Brooklyn. That's Ilana_Brooklyn. And as we like to say on the show, keep it geeky.
Hey, thanks for watching the previous video from Graphic Policy Television. Just by watching, you help support our site. Thank you so much. Now, if you're watching these videos, you probably care about geeky things like movies, television, comic books, toys, games, video games, you name it. You can go and subscribe right now to our YouTube channel to stay in touch and catch all the new videos, or check out our website at graphicpolicy.com. There's a nice link on this end of the video. But as always, thank you for watching. Keep on rocking and keep it geeky.